Hi Victor, here is your technique video. This is certainly the hardest part of transitioning from being somewhat of a beginner player to intermediate. It usually involves these plateaus where we realize we don't just have to add new concepts, but rethink what we've been doing. And that seems to be a spot you're at right now. Plenty of people play with somewhat limiting technique and are really good, but have simple limitations, like not being able to do this or use their pinky. But as we move into working on Jack Johnson and John Mayer stuff, it'll naturally force you into having to reassess these things. But just starting with how I'm holding the instrument. And for the sake of the discussion today, let's just go, my feet are on the ground, shoulder width apart. So where you've been playing, you've had your elbow back farther and your wrist in this position and your hand cranked sort of like that, like the position that I'm in right now, which has led to a thumb sort of off to the side, feeling like we can't quite reach our fingers, and then there's this space right there, which of course is saying this much of my finger is not available to me, as it would be if I just went into a normal clutch position. So these are the reasons it's happening. One thing you can do is find a chair that'll limit your motion, whether it has a high armrest on it, or you even turn it in an awkward way where it restricts your movement of your elbow back. That can be a way to trick yourself into improving on this quickly. So I highly recommend that. But here's what I'm doing. I've got I'm palm up on my left hand in my lap, just beside my knee. Now, when I come up from that, we see my elbow is towards the front of my torso. Not back here, but here. And from there, with minimal movement, I'm going to grab the instrument like I'm about to play G here. And actually, my elbow didn't need to move to accommodate that, maybe a half of an inch. So that's the thing, feeling like it needs to be up here is eliminating X% of your hand. So for starts, that's how we can get your elbow in good position. And really, when we're working on this aspect, take your time fretting. It can feel like this is my attempt. I should get it in a couple of seconds because of what happens in songs. But at this point, the more time you can spend consciously, making the correct shapes, the better. And yeah, it seems like a lot of the things that are going wrong are elbows back here, origin. So some of the things we talked about during the lesson are, as you said, you'd already been practicing using your ring finger in this position. If I were like this, it would feel like my middle finger kind of didn't quite reach, and like this didn't really work, and I would hit the string above it and sound it. Whereas if I'm like this, it's more doable. And we're definitely not looking to seesaw. We'll get to right hand in a second, where, two fingers are pushing down and my middle finger is in between, as though I'm about to use it. So when I'm going through a pentatonic box here, naturally my thumb starts about here, and around the fourth string, my thumb starts to transition, and then on the third string, where we do the majority of our bending on the third string and above, I'm now in clutch position, where I'm bending with the force of these two fingers. Let's take a look at what I'm doing. I have my hand flush against the fretboard like this. There might be a little tiny bit of space occasionally, but I've got one knuckle, and not like this, not over, but just chilling, and then letting my hand come out here and do how we're going to get into a more effective thumb over top clutch position that accomplishes a lot of the same things that playing in classical thumb position can. A lot of people, if I had my elbow back here, I wouldn't really get my thumb over the top much, and it would feel like I should just do bends that way with my thumb down here. But in reality, we want the extra leverage of our hand cranking like that, but not this, where same problem. So there we are. And you can go, which was, bend, relax, and pull off. So that's on the G string. Then when you get to, and that's these two fingers. So when you get to the B string, it spreads out, but they remain partnered with each other. And, excuse me, is a thing. So as long as we successfully keep our first finger down, that last pull off should be no problem. If it's ever fizzled out for you, or it felt like you had to pick the string, it was just that your first finger wasn't pushed down. So that should seem a little tricky. This, where you actually, in reach position, do that same bend, relax, pull off. But it's a good way to force the issue. And I want to remind you, you want your middle finger to feel like it's associated with the 7th fret, not the 6th fret when you're doing this hand movement. It's here I am here, comfortably, and then as well as extending out into pentatonic 2 pretty often, which is just this, where like we talked about during the lesson, you can bend on either side of it. And these index finger bends, given it's not something we do a ton, it's something that, John Mayer does a lot and can add a lot to your game. And in this specific box, it's just, B.B. King taught us a lot about it. So similarly, if I were back here like this, with the space and my thumb feeling like it shouldn't go over the top, I probably couldn't do that first finger bend, or it would feel really, really difficult, versus here where there's more ability to push up. That more or less covers our left hand approach. If you can just work off of the elbow position, you'll be good. And when we go to do things like bar chords or things that have reaches in them, my wrist is just in this position and my thumb's in dead center of the fretboard classical position, which if I move my elbow back, my thumb wants to be up a little higher and our hand sandwiches up. Very often we're bent at this knuckle when we play, or we're even bent at the first knuckle up. We're like this, or we're like this. But when we're playing in our other thumb position, classical thumb position, 4-finger, I am in this wrist position, and my hand is straight. My finger's still curved, but I'm not trying to touch the fretboard subconsciously. So if I move my elbow back, that would be a lot like what you're dealing with. And this thumb position, like I'm saying, is for I'm playing bar chords, or there's reaches. There's notes in reach position, so more of a classical 4-finger type playing situation. Great, so that covers left hand. When it comes to right hand, I've got my arm resting on the instrument, and my elbow right here is in the crook, such that I'm not out in front of the instrument pulling back, but I'm just chilling on it like that, in a position where I can comfortably make my palm rest against the instrument like that. Cool, so I know you remember we talked about the wider range of motion required for strumming, and doing something like where I'm going between E and then just moving this shape to sus2. We're really just playing down, up, and sometimes we do hit 4 strings or 3 strings, but right now we're working on hitting all the strings, as that's something we want to be able to do. And when you move into your jack stuff, or anything that's got a funky percussive element to it, naturally when we work on those things, it'll push you in the direction that we're discussing right now. So wider range of motion on those strums, and you're just not going to have to hit as hard as you're used to. Not nearly as much attack to get a nice. It's just relaxed one movement like that. My wrist is still straight, but loose. You know, there's pretty much none of this, or if there was, it'd be, you know, very, very nominal. And I think where we mainly need to focus in is when you're picking single notes. From going up and down pentatonic scale, you've developed this approach where you're using your whole arm like this to move around, with your entire arm moving up and down. So that would be workable for exactly this kind of scale. But very often we're going to be going, you know, 6th string, 3rd string, 1st string, back to the 6th string, you know, or something, where we need this wider range of motion. And starting to even play at a higher tempo, it would be impossible to do like this. So what do we want to do instead? Here's my palm, and it's up here. I'm not necessarily even anchored there, but pretty close to that position. Not this, but this. And when I'm on the low strings, it's still more or less the same position that you've been in. But the difference is when I get to the higher strings, I just pivot my wrist a little bit. And if we look, even if it feels weird, it's a very nominal positional change for me to just turn my wrist to that way where I can reach the 1st string or the 2nd string. And certainly, you know, if you just think about going like, trying to hit a bunch of, you know, just back and forth between a low note and a high note. Right now I'm playing A minor as a bar chord, and just randomly going between, like, you know, 6th and 3rd, 5th and 2nd, something where we're covering this wider range of motion. Where doing that might be possible, but it'd be a little clunky. And when we started to be able to, when we started to need to play it faster, or I do this and move up and down with my arm, wouldn't even work anymore for, which is not that fast. You know, there's regular songs. And now I don't actually even have time to do this arm moves up and down thing anymore. So that was a very logical choice, but it turns out we want to approach it a little bit differently, keeping in mind that we don't just go, you know, this string, this string, this string, this string, this string when we're actually playing. And again, that wrist position change, even if it feels really weird for you, is very small. So there we are. In the grand scheme, it's a lot like strumming. If we look at what people who teach, I'm going to rest my hand here, accomplish, they're in more or less the position that I've been talking about. So you can do that as a reference point to get into good position, and then just make a relaxed fist up here. So that if you can't wrestle your hand into this feeling natural, anchor and then see where you end up. And then I advocate for not actually anchoring in there. But, you know, especially if you're playing rhythm guitar. But that will get you vertically where we want to be. And then, you know, playing from this little wrist tweak space, just a little wrist movement in our playing, which is this much movement rather than arm, arm, arm. Cool, bro. So I will talk to you soon. And I hope this is a fruitful practice session. Again, looking forward to getting into some fun music. Seems like we got real similar taste, and, you know, building the John Mayer skill set, aside from the very tip-top difficult stuff he does, it's pretty workable actually, and really fun. Same with Jack's stuff. So there you go. That'll be the least fun lesson ever, and we'll see when we get into music that these aren't just style choices, but where the limitations pop up. Cheers. Have a great weekend.